So I'm Joe Offenberg. I'm a senior principal consultant. I'm based in New York City, and I've been doing workload automation and process automation, and now continuous delivery and release automation. Basically my whole career, 20 years of automation experience. And so today I want to talk to you about continuous delivery and applying continuous delivery practices to the operations side of the house to ensure that the continuous delivery pipeline is fully intact regardless of the types of artifacts that you might require in your environment. So it's great to see such a huge interest in this topic. Thank you all for coming, and let's go ahead and get started here. So this is for information purposes only, and I'm going to move on quickly. We're going to talk about some of the representations of DevOps and continuous delivery by many software companies and how we're approaching it, and how some have argued for a more agile approach for operations, and how we can apply that practically and do it with some of the tools we have today, specifically CA's Release Automation and Continuous Delivery Edition technology. Then we'll talk about how we can expand the user community that's involved in continuous delivery to include the folks on the operations side as well. And it's very important that everybody understands the service delivery model for continuous delivery and what's required to support the operations side, right? And then I'll show you some comparisons to some of the existing automation tools that you may have already in your environment. So most of the presentations I've seen, many of them here at CA World, focus on the SDLC, or the Software Development Lifecycle. And what that typically means is you're looking at all the tools required to get application code, from the developers, from their repositories and their change control sources, compiled and built and then deployed out to different environments. What we really don't see a lot of on these types of slides is what's required on the operations side to really make the application deployable and to support the application all the way into production, right? So maybe towards the right side of the spectrum here, you see some provisioning tools and some cloud and configuration tools. But most of the focus in continuous delivery has been really on pushing out application code and artifacts, and not on things like monitoring policy and security policy and configuration management policy. Also, what about workload automation jobs? These are the types of things that can bring the continuous delivery pipeline to a halt because they're required to get these applications into production. And if you have to make a phone call, while you're doing a deployment, so somebody can manually apply the security policy to an application, then that's not true continuous delivery. So we have to include those types of artifacts in the pipeline. So here's a quote from a customer, and what it basically says is that the implementation of a continuous delivery service like release automation has opened up a whole new world of automation, not just for deploying applications, but for other aspects, like the databases, the network appliances, and the application service. So they started to figure this out. They started to realize that the automation service that we're providing can also be used for other things beyond moving application code into production. And it's doing this, it's all in support of continuous delivery. It's all in support of bringing innovation faster to the end users. So there are some, if you went on the web, there are some sites dedicated to Agile for operations, right? And there are some discussions on how we can start taking the principles of Agile methodology and Agile development and applying those to operations side. Specifically, the idea that you can make small incremental changes and move them through the different testing environments and the different staging environments all the way through production, including things like security and monitoring and updates to the network and those type of changes, right? And also things like updates to workload and job definitions and ETL jobs, for example, that support the application, but have traditionally been implemented by the operations side, right? So if we provide a continuous delivery service that can support everybody, then it's just another type of artifact. And that's what we really have to do is expand the artifact conversation and really understand, in order to do that, what is it that the operations side require for there. When we focus on continuous delivery, we're always looking at enhancing the application. What's important to make the application better? What is some of the functional capabilities you might see? But on the operation side, they're not so focused on the application enhancements or adding these features. They're more focused on things like scalability of the application, availability of the application, making sure that there's proper incident management so they can reduce mean times to repair, access control and security control. These are the things that on the operations side they need in their enhancements to an application, right? So that's what we're focusing on, and we need to support these ideas for continuous delivery. So even things like the application onboarding process, when new applications need to be brought into the continuous delivery service, how can that be done in the least disruptive manner? How do we support new users that need to be onboarded to the application? How do we provide training to the different roles in an organization? All of these things are what the operations side are focusing on when they're trying to achieve continuous delivery for their side of the application. Okay? So when we talk about the artifacts, there's a lot of different use cases around deploying things specifically in support of the application, looking at things like monitoring, CA's NIMSoft UIM solution, for example. A couple of good use cases here, right? We can deploy new probes to monitor new enhanced features of the application, or like for APM, for example, we can support new URLs and new performance monitoring of new features of the application, right? If you're going to release new capabilities to the application, you have to be able to monitor those new capabilities properly. And you don't want to put it into production before that monitoring is in place. So that's one use case. The other use case for continuous delivery is integration with these monitoring tools so that when you're actually doing a deployment, right, we can see that these systems that you're deploying to have to be put in maintenance mode. So that has to be all in an automated way, part of the continuous delivery pipeline. So that integration is crucial, and we support that today with CA release automation, basically through action packs that integrate with things like NIMSoft and Nagios and other monitoring tools. The integration with network devices, specifically load balancers, very crucial to continuous delivery, especially if you're doing rolling deployments, right? If you're going to have a situation where you have 10 systems behind a load balancer, right? You need to support the ability to pull those systems out of the load balancer, shut down their services, right? Do it in an incremental way so that the service itself isn't brought down. Out of the 10 systems behind the load balancer, maybe you do 2 at a time, 3 at a time, in such a way that, in an automated way, where you can pull the systems out, deploy the latest builds, update the application, and put them back in, and this way there's no downtime. Application stays running, the end users aren't impacted, and this is important for availability. This is the kind of availability that the operations side likes to see. Then there's security policy. Security policy, things like SiteMinder and single sign-on. As you add and enhance the application, there's no way you're going to be able to roll it out, these enhancements, to production without first applying a proper security policy to those new pages or new features of the application, right? So it's very important that you include those security policy artifacts in the continuous delivery package, right? So that's what I'm talking about here. All of these artifacts that need to be part of the package, in addition to the usual continuous delivery artifacts, like database updates, code changes, web pages, ASP pages, all of those things that make up an application release or a build need to be part of the package, including things like security policy and monitoring policy, in addition to workload jobs too. If you take an application and you add new fields to a database, for example, now you need ETL jobs to go and load data into those fields as part of the, the workload automation process. Those job definitions need to be part of that release, right? And traditionally, that's a whole separate process for deployment. It's done by a different team. It's done by a workload team, somewhere on the operations side, and they have to coordinate. They have to get on a bridge call or something, and this takes a lot of time, and this slows down the continuous delivery pipeline. In fact, it's kind of like a leak in the continuous delivery pipeline, right? And things are going to slow down. And what you want to do is add those artifacts, get the operation folks on board, get the workload folks on board, using the continuous delivery service, using release automation to deploy their artifacts too. So even if it's just a workload update, right, they would use this tool to push those updates through the continuous delivery pipeline. And that's what I'm talking about. Other parts of the solution, Runbook Automation, for example, or provisioning, these have traditionally been, part of a configuration management strategy. But if we're going to bring them into continuous delivery, and you're going to enforce continuous delivery, scenarios like you create a testing environment on the fly, right? You provision the testing environment, you apply the latest build, and then you deprovision it. There's no need to make phone calls and put requests and service desk tickets, open those up to create the test environment. This can all be part of the pipeline. It's all supporting the continuous delivery of an application. So we want to include this as well. So the scope of this is not limited by anything. We really want to include any type of artifact that would be required to move an application through to production. Any type of artifact where you would have to make a phone call and say, hey, load this up into the new environment. We want to reduce that and eliminate those phone calls and do it in an automated way. So how do we do this? Well, if you're familiar with CA release automation, right, we break down applications. We create an application model, and we break this down by components. So within an application, you're going to have your web server component, your application server component, your back-end database component. And for every component, there are a couple of different attributes, right? There's the artifacts that need to be deployed to update that component. So if it's a database, you might have SQL files that need to be deployed and executed against the database to update the database. If it's a WebSphere application server, you might have a WAR file or an EAR file that needs to be deployed. But if it's a workload automation system, like AutoSys, for example, another fine CA technology, right? We would have JIL, job definitions, that are part of the continuous delivery package, that are part of the release package. And that workload automation would just be another component in the application model. So it's no different than deploying anything else. There's no preference given to development artifacts over operation artifacts. They're all the same, and they're all stored in the artifact repository, right? And that's where we're going to store these operational artifacts. So if we look at some other artifacts, maybe like monitoring policy, same thing. The probe definitions for NIMSOFT, they could be part of a package. They could be stored in the repository and put into the release package. Anything security policy for SiteMinder can be put into the package and then deployed with the release. And this is something that you're going to do because the process for deploying it is going to be the same every time. The only thing that's going to change are the artifacts. And because of this process is reusable, the efficiencies gained on the operations side are going to be tremendous because they suffer from the same problems that you see on the development side with manual deployments. Humans making mistakes, humans forgetting to, cross the T's and dot the I's in the right places. So these are the things we want to see applied to the operations side. Okay? Now this is an example of a workload automation process that takes the job definitions And one of the great features of CA release automation is this ability to take a process and make it reusable across different environments. So the same process for deploying the job definitions to like a dev environment or a test environment is used for deploying to production. The only thing different are certain characteristics of the artifact, right? So we can take an artifact like a jobs definition file and actually change the properties of it in normalize them based on what environment they deploy to. So that means if you have different machine names in development and different job owners and different user credentials that the jobs execute as in one environment over the next, we can make those changes in an automated way as we deploy those definitions, right? So this is very important. You can take the same artifact, and as we deploy it to the different environments, we'll update the characteristics of those artifacts accordingly so that they meet the needs of that environment. And that's an important concept to understand because we don't need different processes to deploy in different environments. And not only are these processes reusable across different environments, right? They're reusable across different applications. So if you're the monitoring person and you're responsible for creating the process that deploys the monitoring updates, once you create it once for one application, you can then take that and use it in other applications. So this is very important, and this is going to save a lot of time, and these are some of the concepts that we've been applying on the application deployment side in continuous delivery that now all these other components can benefit from. And we just want to make sure they don't get left behind. We want to make sure we're not making phone calls so that people can manually deploy those components. And this benefit is really going to help onboarding these applications because if everybody is using the same tool, there's a lot more collaboration and a lot more transparency in the end-to-end process for how these deployments work. And that's very important. So by bringing different people into the continuous delivery solution, new end users, right? We expand the community of folks that are benefiting from automation and utilizing the tool. So we're not funneling the automation through a couple of scripting experts. If I'm a DBA, I can log into Release Automation and create and own the process for deploying database updates. If I'm a WebSphere expert, I can create that process for deploying updates to WebSphere. If I'm a SiteMinder expert, I can do the same thing. It's more important that I understand the technology that I'm trying to automate deployments to than to understand the release automation tool, right? The release automation tool, within a couple of days, I can understand the process designer. It's all visual. It's a very easy tool to use. And it's more important that I understand how to deploy the technology I'm deploying. Otherwise, what happens is you're going to funnel all of this automation through a couple of scripting experts, and that's going to really slow down adoption. And that's going to make it almost impossible to roll this out to, across an enterprise, to thousands of applications, right? And that's really what it's all about, right? So we want to open this up to, the cloud experts that are going to be responsible for provisioning, the sysadmins that have to keep the systems updated, and the Oracle databases patched, and the database admins who are responsible for making the database changes, security experts, all the web and app server admins, the network folks that have to make changes to maybe a network device setting because the application is working a different way. You need some different cache settings on the network devices, right? Different tweaks to the operating system. All of that is in scope. All of that is in scope for the continuous delivery service supported by Release Automation. So there's some additional benefits, right, for operations. And not only are they seeing the end-to-end process and are part of the continuous delivery service and see end-to-end how The schedule is going to be much tighter, right, because everything is automated. So that's going to speed things up. We're going to require less of their time and resources for doing deployments. They can focus on what's important to them. They can focus on things like the mean time to repair and the SLAs. They can start having visibility into SLA information earlier in the process. They can shift left things like performance and response time monitoring for the SLAs that they're accountable for, right? And this is extremely important because typically they don't have this information until applications are pushed out to production. And that's when they start monitoring things. If they can see that a build in a testing environment is now, because their monitoring policy is part of that build and being deployed in testing, they can start picking up metrics from the test environment. They can see, hey, this build, there's a sharp increase in response time. The end users are not going to be happy, and this is something that they might not necessarily have seen without this type of collaboration, right? Furthermore, there's the governance aspect of this. There's reduced risk. Automation means less human error. Just bottom line, there's less people making mistakes involved in the deployments. The other aspect of this is because we're automating every step of the process, we can have better and tighter integration with the change request process. We can open up a change request during the test cycle. We have a new release coming out, and we can open up a change request in Remedy or ServiceNow or CA Service Desk, right? And as that build progresses and all the tests are executing through the different environments, we can update that change request and really enrich that change request with more information. So now the auditors have more information, right? They can see not just that the application code was updated, but that the security policy was updated, that security scans were done. And this is going to make them very happy. And because all this information is going to be enriching the change request in one place, the amount of time to approve a change request is going to be greatly reduced. So that even if you do have a manual change request approval process as part of your continuous delivery pipeline, instead of taking hours, it can take minutes. And that's very crucial for continuous delivery to be able to reduce that kind of lag and still maintain a high level of governance, right? And all of this results in much tighter timelines and more frequent updates and enhancements to the application to really speed up innovation for your end users. So this is a screenshot from our UIM tool, and what you see are different builds propagating their way through the different environments. And we can see there's a build here in QA that's not meeting the SLA requirements, right? And this is because the monitoring policy is already part of the build. They can get these metrics. And so being able to propagate monitoring information for the operation folks is crucial to see, to raise some red flags and to open up some incidents and tickets saying, hey, this build's not going to cut it. Maybe it passed all of the QA tests. Maybe it passed all of the functional testing and it's ready for production from every other aspect, but it's not going to meet SLA requirements. It's not going to be as highly available as our customers expect it to be. And this is something that now, because they're part of this continuous delivery process, they can identify much sooner. So now that we understand what the continuous delivery tool can provide and what the release automation service can provide, there might be some in operations that say, hey, we have a lot of automation tools in the environment. How can we use our existing tools? We don't want to implement a new tool. How can we use our existing tools to do some of these things and still maintain this continuous delivery service? Well, there are some differences in what some of the automation tools provide. Significant differences when it comes to the use case of continuous delivery. CA Release Automation was purpose-built for continuous delivery. This one use case to drive a continuous delivery pipeline at the enterprise level for as many different applications as possible so you can deploy any build to any environment at any time. That's it. That's what Release Automation does. Some of the other tools were built for different purposes. Workload automation is for high volume transactional processing of jobs. Typically, things like extracting data from here, dropping it over there, having another job, massage the data and then load it up into a database. These type of jobs that happen thousands of times a day is what workload automation is good at. It doesn't have the concept of artifacts, right? It doesn't have the concept of a repository for storing the artifacts. It doesn't understand the application model, so you can't say, you can't manage the relationships of the database dependencies on the web server dependencies on the application server and those type of things without a lot of extra work, so it's not well suited for continuous delivery. Same thing with process automation. Process automation is very good. There are very good tools out there. CA process automation tool is one. Microsoft has a tool. BMC has a tool. They're very good at managing like service management processes and providing human interaction with a process, providing a form or an email interface into an automated process. But again, they lack a repository for storing artifacts. They lack the ability to track artifacts being deployed to different environments. The reporting is more about the metrics and the efficiency of executing a process as opposed to how fast are we deploying updates to the application. So they're not, it's not a well-suited tool for release automation. So if you're using these tools, they're great, and we can integrate with them with release automation, but release automation truly provides a continuous delivery service to the enterprise. And that's what it was built from the ground up for, and that's what you should be using for continuous delivery. Now, Runbook Automation, it's a very good tool. I have a very comprehensive list of comparisons. Again, it lacks an application model. It lacks an application repository. The reporting metrics are very different. The architecture is not designed to, it's scalable and it can be used across different geos and everything, but it's not designed to support a lot of different integrations, a lot of different SDLC integrations. Most Runbook automation tools are designed to execute commands on systems like rotating log files and cleaning up directories and rebooting services and those type of things. Not so much pulling things out of GitHub and executing a deployment in WebSphere and integrating tightly with a load balancer. This would be something very difficult to achieve with Runbook automation. But it is very good at sending emails and capturing responses from people so that the process can continue. So there are times when we can integrate the tools, but you can see here that CA release automation is built for continuous delivery, and that's what you should use. So in summary, just a few words to review here. The continuous delivery service is more than just for the software development lifecycle, right? We want to achieve better collaboration by opening up this service to more users, especially on the operations side. Like I said, anytime somebody has to manually do something to support the deployment of a new release of an application, that's in scope for a continuous delivery, whether it's a database update or a workload job update or a security policy update, right? Getting everybody using the same tool, it makes it easier to see, end to end how the process worked. And if you ever have to try to solve a problem, you'll know right away what the changes are. All the changes are being made with one tool, and all the logging and auditing is going to be in one place. And that's the bottom line. So thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate any feedback regarding this, and let's keep the dialogue going. Thank you.